Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Delisle, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Join us right now from beautiful Vancouver Island in British Columbia. Our guest is here today to celebrate, I think, a really important graphic novel. It's called The Golden Quest. Please welcome to the show, David Delisle. Hey, David, how are you?
Good. So excited to be on here with you today.
I'm excited to have you on because The Golden Quest touches on a subject that is near and dear to my heart, I think it's almost as important as reading with our kids, and that is helping our kids becoming financially literate.
Yes, so important. And I've got two young boys, and they were actually the inspiration for this whole project because I wanted to sort of pass on some of my knowledge of financial literacy and what I've done with investing, looking back on the years, but make it fun. Because I think that's the thing, is the reason it's so near and dear to so many people's hearts is because we aren't teaching it, and when we do, it's not fun. So I want to make this a really easy, fun way to learn about finances.
You know, it's interesting that you said we're not teaching our kids financial literacy, and I absolutely agree with you. And I think some people would go even further to say that, kids 5, 6, 7, 9 years old, why would we talk about finances with kids that young? But we don't realize that we are talking to our kids at that age, and I'm thinking it's similar in Canada, but definitely here in the United States, many of us are pounding into our kids from a very young age that they have to get into a big 4-year, very expensive college. So I know in financial literacy, we're talking to our kids about wants versus needs, but we never think about the fact that we are telling our kids from the age of 2 or 3 or 5 that, they got to get into Harvard, they got to get good grades because they got to get here. And so what they're also hearing, and what happens is when those kids get to be 16, 17, 18 years old, and they still haven't become financially literate, they hear that voice that we've put into their heads, and they think, I got to get into that good school. That means that I'm probably going to have to go into debt by $100,000, $200,000. So this is why this subject is really important to me, because I don't think we realize how much pressure we put on our kids to take on that kind of debt when they're way too young to understand what they're getting into.
For sure. I mean, and that's the thing. So when the teaching in the book, it's the same lessons I teach to adults as well, but it's all around mindset and habits, because that's what we are teaching our kids, and that's what we learn as adults as well. So I'd take it a step further, like with that same question with the debt and what we're teaching our kids to go to this university or college, like what are we teaching them? Are we teaching them that to do this, you'll get a good job and have more money, and if you have more money, you'll be happier, more successful? Is that what we're teaching them? Because usually that is what we're teaching them. Same with kids when we're teaching them to save. Are we teaching them to save for financial freedom, or are we teaching them to save so they can buy, more video games and a fancy bike and more stuff? And as soon as we start realizing how much we're part of this whole, consumerist save to buy and have more money, but we're not teaching you how, we really are teaching our kids something. Like you said, it's just maybe not what we want to be teaching them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's talk about The Golden Quest. First, let's talk about it as a story. Why are kids going to want to read this book?
So, because it's, one, a graphic novel, and we know kids love graphic novels. 2, it's a story, but one of these classic hero's journeys. So a young boy goes on an adventure, meets different mentors along the way. It's a fantastical world. And so the whole thing is based in this fantasy world where he's on an adventure learning the basic lessons around money. So the 4 golden rules about money is what he learns on this quest. So it makes it really accessible as well. There's no math in the book. So this isn't a book about spreadsheets and macroeconomics and math. This is about fundamentals that we all should learn, but never actually have an opportunity to.
So let's talk about those 4 golden rules. What is it that we should be teaching our kids, not only while we're reading the Golden Quest to them, but ongoing?
So the first rule, and this goes back to a bit what I was sort of alluding to and you were with this sort of mindset piece, because I think this is, when we think about money, one of the things we really skip over. So the first lesson is only buy the awesome stuff. And this concept of figuring out, like, what is your awesome stuff? And most of us think we know what it is, but when we really push a little bit further, that why is a little bit elusive. And that basically dictates everything. Like, what is your why? What is important to you? And then only focusing on those things. So a whole shift from how to have more money to why you want it in the first place. So that's the first lesson. The next 2 are really around habits. So always saving first is one of the habits. And this is along with budgeting. And we all know this. If we got in the habit of doing it, it's the first step to creating wealth, is that saving. But we all hate budgeting. Save first. Third lesson, send that money to work, which is the investing and getting your money to work for you. So it grows with compound interest. And the fourth, which again, we don't always teach when we think about finance, but it's give and you'll have more. And really there's a lot of power in that giving, and it's a mindset piece as well. So those are the 4 lessons. And then it all wraps up in the whole why, which brings us back to the first lesson. And it's really to have the freedom for that awesome stuff. What is your awesome stuff? And it may be things, it may be experiences, it may be something else, but that's really it in a nutshell. And once you start embodying and living those lessons, you really are on that journey to a richer life.
I love this. I love the fact that lesson number 4 is give and you'll have more. This whole idea of sharing what we have. And I never thought that, the idea of sharing and donating to others and using our money to make our community better and lift up others would be part of financial literacy. But I'm really happy that it is such an important part. One of the things I did want to talk to you about, though, is this idea of buying only the awesome stuff, which is wonderful. And I think that ties into another thing that we've talked about here a lot on the podcast, which is media literacy. As we're helping our kids become financially literate in understanding money and how it works, we also, I think, have to help our kids become media literate and how the media works, because they're exposed to so many messages every single day. When I studied media literacy 20 years ago, I think the number was 3,000 media messages a day. Now it's probably triple or quadruple that. And in not every, but most of the messages that kids are getting is buy this because it is the awesome stuff. And our kids aren't taking the time to sit down and think, why is that person telling me that? Is it really awesome, or do they just want to get my money?
For sure. And that's why, so I rattled off the lessons fast just so you get the basic idea and concept. But all these lessons, they might seem simple on the surface, but there's so much more to them. So this idea of the awesome stuff is a perfect example. So even in this story, the young boy is learning this lesson, and his immediate response is, everything I buy is awesome. I mean, obviously, all my stuff is awesome. And that's what we think as adults as well. But then when you dig a little deeper, you realize, no, like all the things you have are distracting. We all have that one favorite thing, that one favorite sweater in the closet. If our house was on fire, the one thing we'd grab. I see you looking at your sweater. We have those things. So we think everything we have is awesome. But if it really got stripped down to the basics, what's really important to you? And then what makes that so powerful is then with this media lesson, what you'll find is when you see all these people doing these amazing things or telling you what you should buy or, being happy with these things and pushing this stuff on you, we feel a lot of envy or comparison, or we should have that. And all those things creep in. But if we're already really solid on what really is important to us, what really makes us happy, what really lights us up, those things don't have the same power over us because we already know what's important to us. So those media messages and external factors and what someone else likes, we're happy for them, but we're not going to feel envy and jealousy because we already know what's important to us, and it's not those things.
Yeah. This feels kind of magical because it feels like everything is kind of swirling around, because one of the things we talk about here on the podcast is that in addition to helping our kids learn how to read, in addition to growing closer with our kids, one of the things that happens when we read with our kids is we help our kids understand their values. We help instill our values into them, and we also help them kind of understand what's important to them. And having this conversation, this ongoing conversation with our kids about what's important to them, what do they really value, I think is going to really come in handy with them, talking about what which spoke about. What is really awesome, and what's really awesome to you might be very different than what's really awesome to somebody else, and that's okay.
For sure. And that's when you start thinking about, when we think about money and teaching it, it feels like this big, tricky conversation. But it's exactly that. It's really just values. And what's great is you can have those conversations as a family and realize the differences. So maybe as a family, we value our home, which is why we're doing this renovation downstairs or putting all this money into this big deck on the back. Or maybe what it is, we value, travel, and that's why we're doing this adventure. Or we value friends, and that's why we have these big weekend dinners with these big, groups of people. You can have those conversations, and then kids start seeing, okay, this is where my family puts their money, their time, their energy, and this is what they value. But then as individuals too, okay, maybe mom, this is what she values. Or this kids, they really like this. And if it is something like Pokemon cards, and as parents, we cringe, we're like, how could you like this? Recognizing if that's their awesome stuff, that's their awesome stuff. Let them love that without that judgment, because everyone has different things, and these conversations don't have to be difficult, and they don't have to be around lack and what you should be doing or saving. It can just be what are your values? What is important to you? Yeah. And that's the conversation around money that we should be having.
Yeah. And this is kind of slightly off the subject, but one of the things, David, that I just discovered through my son, who's now 29 and still loves Pokemon cards, is I guess every once in a while they put out this one series of Pokemon cards, and they only do one run of it, and so there's only like 100 of them or 200 of them, and suddenly those cards are like crazy valuable. So I don't know if it's a good investment, but it could come back to be very valuable at some point.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend it as an investment, even though they could be value. I mean, it's one of these strange items. But yeah, it's one of those things where, so if you think of your son with the Pokemon cards, and I don't know if he's like this, but I see with my kids with the different things they love, it's when they just get so excited, so passionate about that thing, you can just see it. Their eyes light up, their whole body language changes, they're just excited, and they become a different person because they're talking about something they're really passionate and love. And if it's Pokemon cards, whether it's as an investment or something they love, or they just like the collecting, if it's giving that feeling, that's what we're seeking. But if it's, I like it, it's sitting on in a drawer and I never look at it, and I feel like it's an investment, it's growing in value, but it doesn't really get me that excited. It's just a thing I collect. That's what we got to start recognizing. How much joy are these things bringing us? And it's a much more enjoyable conversation because now you're really unlocking, like you said, those values and what's important to people.
Yeah. Now, David, I think all the things that we've spoken about so far are really sound advice, good ideas. The lessons that we're going to find in the Golden Quest, I think, are pretty solid. But there might be somebody out there saying, who's this guy, David Delisle? Why should I be listening to him about finance?
For sure. And I get that. And for myself too, it's something that I got to work on because I don't like talking about myself so much. I love talking about the ideas. But for myself, I was always that, money nerd that loved finance. So I was reading books about finance when I was in grade 5. And when I was, a 10-year-old, I was going to, conferences that, people were, doing book tours on their finance books, and started investing in real estate in my early 20s. So for myself, I was semi-retired by 40 and have sort of done all these things and been in the weeds. So like I could talk about all the boring mechanical economic side of finance, but I realized people don't love that. So what is really important? What is the core essence? And that's why I talk about these other things, because I get that that's what's really important. The actual mechanics aren't as important. Whether you invest in real estate or the stock market or give everything over to a financial advisor, that's not as important as these habits that I talk about. So that's my story and my journey.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. 5th grade, and you're going to meet authors of financial books. That must have what was the reaction of your parents when they're like, you want to do what?
Oh, it was ridiculous because it wasn't something that was passed on by them. I mean, my views on money were completely different than theirs. And I remember like running into their room and being excited about like, hey, did you know like you could, if you set this up, then you get these tax savings, or you invested in this, or what are you doing? And I think it was just the concept at an early age for me when I realized money could actually earn money for you. So even something as simple as putting, $5 or $10 in a bank account and seeing the interest and checking every month and seeing like I made 25 cents or $1, like without doing anything. I think that just, it fascinated me. And I always saw it less as something I wanted to accumulate mass amounts of, but more of just that freedom of like, hey, if I had enough money making money for me, I can do all these other things that I'd love to do and not struggle to have to earn as much. So yeah, no, it was definitely, it was funny. And I read, all those different books here in Canada. David Chilton's a really popular author that wrote The Wealthy Barber. I read stuff from Peter Lynch, who's all about, stock markets and stock picking and, very value-based investing. And so all these things just fascinated me as a kid. And yeah, definitely a money nerd.
Yeah. So what was it like to go from this money nerd, semi-retired, investor, financial guru kind of guy to writing a children's book?
It really, like I stumbled upon it. For me, it was really, I remember reading the book, The Last Lecture, just an amazing book about a professor who was diagnosed with terminal cancer, but he wrote this beautiful book about basically the book came afterwards. He did this lecture that he basically did a lecture for his young son. I don't know if he was even born yet or he was coming, and just all these life lessons, what was important to him, passing on this knowledge. And so for me, that's what I want to do, is I want to pass on to my young boys this knowledge. And it just grew into this bigger and bigger project. And I didn't realize at the time how different some of my views on money and finances were until the whole process. And that's when it started becoming a bigger thing and more of a passion, because I could start seeing that there's messages and there's, like you said, like these pieces in it that I get really excited about that aren't being taught. And doing the graphic novel was so fun. I worked with an amazing illustrator down in San Diego, and just making it this fun adventure, because previous to this, trying to talk to my kids about finance, it was never something they get excited about. But just reading this book is so much easier. And I've got kids who can't even read, and they'll just flip through the pictures and get the basic concepts. And that definitely just fills my heart.
Yeah. And, this is, I think, one of those books that we really encourage families to read together with their independent readers and or co-read and talk about, because there are real lessons that we want to impart with our kids, and there are real lessons that we want to instill ourselves, because I think everybody can learn a little bit and become a little bit wiser about our finances, especially today when we're hearing about banks failing and, the financials, what's going to happen tomorrow with finances, we want to be aware. We don't want to be victims of what could happen next. We want to be in control of our lives.
For sure. It's actually a bit of a sort of a secret, not so secret with the book is it's actually written for adults, but I get the kids to teach the parents is really, that's my strategy with this. And the amount of parents that come back all the time and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that this book was for me. And these were lessons that I could use.
Yeah. So a cynical person out there is thinking, okay, I love David admitted it that this was really about getting the kids to teach me about finance, and he's going to tell me to go to his website, and there's something that he's going to try to sell me at the website.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to buy the book, I love that. This is purely a passion project. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it in bookstores. The website's theawesomestuff.com. And yeah, if you love it, that's amazing. But there's no massive upsell. It's just a graphic novel that will actually hopefully start having these conversations with your kids and as a family and change the way you think about money.
Yeah. So I checked it out. There's no pitch. He's not going to be asking you for your life savings to invest in his whatever program it is. So you definitely check it out. Tell me, David, have you caught the graphic writing bug? Are there going to be a series or more books coming from David Delisle?
I hear that a lot, and I'm definitely getting into more author communities. And I do love the medium of graphic novels, teaching these complex ideas in a very simple way. So we'll see. It probably won't be along finance, though. It'll probably be more about, again, mindset pieces, awareness, maybe something around mindfulness. So I've got some ideas. So we'll see what happens. I'm not sure quite yet, though.
Awesome. And again, we really encourage families to do what I didn't do, which is to embrace the idea of graphic novels. I supported my son's love of graphic novels, but I never gave him the credit that he deserved, that in understanding that he was actually reading, that graphic novels are filled with great literature, great lessons. And so when you pick up The Golden Quest for your kids, make sure you sit down and read it with them or co-read it and talk about it. Again, David, tell everybody again where they can go to find out more about you and the book.
So the website's theawesomestuff.com, and you can find the book, The Golden Quest, on Amazon. You can request it at your bookstores. You can, go to your local library and ask for it. I'm working with a distributor because it is a graphic novel. So this whole thing was, it's not a print on demand. It's not you can get into these ebook, but it's really fun to read with your kids and as a family. And as you said, like the graphic novels, I didn't give them as much credit as either because I was thinking comics when we were young kids, but they are not that anymore. I mean, they've converted Sapiens into a graphic novel. Like they can take all these complex stories. So if you think of just like a documentary or movies, that's what's happening with their graphic novels is they're taking these stories and bringing them to life through illustrations, but they're still a story.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. We've had a really great time speaking about financial literacy and the graphic novel, The Golden Quest, with our guest, David Delisle. David, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much. It was so much fun chatting with you, Jed. And yeah, for me, yes, I'm passionate about the finance. Second is kids, reading with kids, doing things with kids, just kids in general. So I love the podcast and the message you're putting out there.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and we hope that you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. To make sure you don't miss a moment of the show, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks going out to my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Jordan Saley, Will Cheever, Cassandra Masonet, Stephanie Davila. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.